Stories are important to all of our holidays, but there's something special about this time of year. We're almost unmanageably committed to creating new stories. I mean, there are entire TV channels that I feel like their entire business model is based off of getting ready for the Christmas season and doing new Christmas romances and Christmas movies. We are compelled to tell stories at this time of the year. A lot of that has to do with our needs, both naturally, psychologically, and spiritually. We're being challenged by the darkness, the cold, and need to work our way through it. That's what stories are for. Let's talk about how these Christmas and Yule stories can really help us with our spiritual growth as we dive into some of the weird and regular ones as we walk together down creation's paths. Hello, everyone. My name is Charlie. I am a Christo-pagan druid and priest of Bridget.
Hello, everyone. My name is Brian. I am a Christmas elf
who does not sit on a shelf. The previous episode for, all that.
I moves through the room causing mischief.
Oh, my goodness. So, there are a lot of stories, and we're not going to be able to touch on all of them. If we miss your favorite story, I am sorry. We are not picking them based off of popularity or because these are the good ones and the other ones don't matter or anything like that. We're just kind of going to be talking about various Christmas and Yule time tales to see what we can glean from them in the time that we have together. They're in no particular order. We're just going to kind of run through as many as we can in the time allotted, because there's just way too many.
We can even make it an official countdown.
No, because that applies order. There is no order. There is only chaos. Speaking of which, if you haven't already, don't forget to like, subscribe, follow, whatever the terminology happens to be on whatever app you're currently listening to us on. We do original Christo-pagan and druid content 5 days a week, Monday through Friday on this podcast, and you don't want to miss a thing. We got a lot of fun stuff coming up. So there are the obvious ones that we've talked about a little bit, and those that we're going to talk about more in future, like Santa Claus. We've kind of talked about the Elf on the Shelf, and we're have an entire episode dedicated to the 3 ghosts of Christmas from A Christmas Carol coming up. So those we're not really going to be talking about in this episode because we either have or will soon be spending a lot of time with them. And I also feel like we have to start with the obvious one, and that is the Christmas story. The Christmas story appears all over the world, and it does not always happen at the winter solstice. Very important. People get confused and think that this idea of the child of light, the savior figure being born in the depths of winter, is the universal theme. No, the universal theme is when life is most perilous for you and your people. That's when the story is set, and that's where these collections of stories come together. In fact, in the Southeast and Eastern Asia, these stories are more commonly told at the end of or in the middle of the monsoon season.
Yeah.
And again, closer to the equator, there really is no winter, so that doesn't really factor in. I have noticed a really interesting thing that has started happening in summer, where we're starting to craft new stories to deal with fire season, since we now have, thank you, global warming and climate change, a fire season. But these stories have certain elements in common, which does not invalidate the stories. I feel like it's a weird thing that people do to say, oh, there are archetypal elements in the story, therefore it means less. Actually, it's the opposite. Archetypes are things that are deeply ingrained in us, and they resonate with us most strongly, which is why they are archetypes. There is generally a child of light. There is generally a mother who has conceived through special means, sometimes through having sex with a deity, sometimes just miraculously. The Buddha was conceived during a dream where his mother dreamed of a white elephant entering her womb. Sometimes they ride on the back of an animal, and only to find out that an animal was a deity, and they are now with child. There are all manner of reasons why the child has a special conception, but there's actually one reason. It's to show an interruption in human nature. This child is different. This child is special. And by the way, we also see this about like Caesar Augustus, who is actually Julius Caesar's 8th nephew on his sister's side. As his legend grew, his father was Jupiter, and he was this divine being who da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And of course, his blessed and holy birth was also celebrated in the emperor because he was deified while he was still alive, and even extra deified upon his death. The point of these stories is not necessarily to say anything metaphysical, though some people do try to turn it into that. The whole point is to show, no, this person is so exceptional, they didn't even come into the world the same way the rest of us did. It's a story telling us about how exceptional the person is. All of the other details are kind of superfluous, and we will notice in most of the narratives, with very few exceptions, don't come up later.
This is also using the archetypes to shortcut through people's psyche on an unconscious level of, once again, something that is sacred is something that is set aside. It's just set aside. It's a basic archetypal level we're talking on now. So for this person to be a sacred person, to be set aside, they now have a birth that is not typical. Therefore, the birth is set aside. It's a shortcut through the brain, part of the psychological magic.
And they're so special that the world generally wants to get rid of them in some way, or there's some peril put in. So the Buddha is born to be head of his clan, his tribe. A holy man shows up and says, oh, he will be the savior of the world. And his father just can't have it and starts concocting a way to keep him from understanding how the world works, right? The Mabon is kidnapped from his mother's arms while he is still a suckling infant and hidden away from the world. And eventually a series of great quests have to be undertaken in order to find the child of light. From there, Jesus, of course, very famously, the Herod sends his soldiers to kill every male child under the age of 2 in the region. This is also a very common motif because they are so special that even the world itself was afraid of how it would change.
Also, it works off of the archetype of authority, where they have been tested and proved themselves. Therefore, they have extra authority.
Yeah. And they were tested even at such a young age.
Yeah. Infancy in a lot of cases.
And yeah, very often. And so those are archetypes that don't tell you less about the character, they tell you more. So did Herod actually kill all the firstborn kids? We have no historical evidence that this event happened, which we think we would have found some reference to this in any other source. We don't. This is where historicity and mythology clash. Understanding that historically is one thing. Understanding this mythologically, this is talking about the threats for the Savior coming into the world. It's also connecting him to the Moses story, because Moses was born when an order went out to kill all of the male infants, and Moses was secreted away. Jesus goes to Egypt and has to return, much like Moses is in Egypt and leads the people back. It is part of a story that is telling you the significance. This is Moses 2. This is a sequel to Moses. It's there to tell you where to fit this character into the mythological schema. And again, I know we get stuck on facts and what have you, but if we skim over these features because of their lack of historicity or their questionable historicity, because I'll say right now, it is not outside of the character of any of the Herods to slaughter all of the kids in a town. Yeah. All of the Herods were monsters. All of the Herods were brutal killers. So it is not outside of the character that we just haven't found evidence of such a thing yet. But I think it's also very important to notice that even at the time the Gospels were being written, nobody questioned, oh yeah, Herod could totally do it. Everybody just accepted the story because it also tells you something about Herod. But these stories are telling us about how the community felt about this person and their importance. And so that's where a lot of the stories that we have about Jesus and the Christmas story factor in. But beyond just the story of Jesus, because we could make this all about him, we have ancillary stories, such as A Charlie Brown Christmas, which is very much a myth of our day. And it's all about what is cast out is what has meaning. It's the Christmas tree that nobody wanted that becomes the most beautiful Christmas tree. It's about the play that nobody really is paying attention to and wanting to do being the meaningful centerpiece of the story. It's about Charlie Brown, who no one listens to, pays attention to, or really cares about, being the director of said play that is the important brick that brings the community together for this really blessed moment where they fix up the tree and everybody sings, and then they have the pageant and everything else. It is a story about how the outcast is what we should be paying attention to, and really is one of the main themes of Christmas. And one of the reasons why it resonates so strongly and why it has become a Christmas tradition to watch it every year. Similar themes are found in other contemporary myths like Frosty the Snowman. It's a lost hat. No matter what version of the story you're listening to, nothing is special about any of the ingredients except for in the weird animated movie that I want to say it was also a Rankin Bass, but I'm not entirely sure who did the animated Frosty the Snowman off the top of my head. But in there, it's of course a magician's hat that is actually magical. And I think that takes away from the story. It's one of the reasons why I'm not a big fan of that animated tale, but it's one of the reasons the song has power to us. Community brought Frosty to life, brings him to life, imbuing him with all of the things that we want in the season. He's jolly. He's caring. He's out there having fun and taking care of people. He's bringing this playfulness into this dark and cold season. And it's through community bringing all the little bits from the coal that at the time the song was written was how you heated your house. So kind of a precious item being added to a corncob pipe, which is the cheapest pipe that you could have. The hat that's described in the story is probably a hat that somebody just found in an attic somewhere, but it's showing again these discarded things can come together as something we can rally around, and it can bring us joy. That really is a theme that we see a lot during these stories. Even characters like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, what makes Rudolph strange is what makes Rudolph special. Rudolph saves Christmas because of his strange glowing red nose. And so again, what is thrown out is what makes us special. And you can see this story about the outcast being just so vital to the season. We can just keep going down. There's a whole plethora of stories that we can follow down this path. That is the story that is being told and retold and retold. It makes sense because this is the time of year where nothing really can go to waste. We're not growing new crops, except for in our modern world, we're growing them in the southern hemisphere for import to the north, right? But when these stories were being written, maybe you had a greenhouse that still had some stuff growing in it if you were wealthy. But even then, you could only stave off the cold for so long before even they would not be productive anymore.
You only had what you had stocked up in the larder. You brought up Rudolph, and I was thinking, I came across a comment the other day. I found it intriguing and also deeply upsetting at the same time. It was very flippant. They only really want you around when they see your value. It was both like, yeah, they get the archetypes involved, but they took the most negative lesson out of it. Because yes, there are people that are going to be in your life. It's not a good thing. It's not a bad thing. Hopefully they could get influenced by your presence and influenced from your interests that might help them to evolve out of that mindset.
It's a basic problem with neoliberalism. You'll hear me and others use that term sometime. And basically what neoliberalism is that anything can be commoditized. Mm-hmm. Anything can be made into something that can be bought or sold. Your attention on social media can be bought and sold. Your attention on television, because that's where it starts, is bought and sold because you are the actual product. It's not the show that's the product. Anything that you get for free, you are the product. You are what's being bought and sold. Whatever the entertainment is what is bringing you into the stable to be commoditized. And once you start understanding that, you understand how this works. And so everything in our modern world has been commoditized. Do you have a cute pet? Well, do they have an Instagram account? How is Instagram being able to sell people's attention on your pet if you're not commoditizing interest in your own pet, right? And that is a problem that these stories really are about the solution. They are about, we didn't see the usefulness of this person until it was absolutely necessary. Imagine what they could have done if they had realized sooner. Yeah. And some stories really do have a tinge of until it was too late.
Especially like with the Rudolph story, I sit back and I see that and I go, this is a wonderful lesson in nonconformity.
Yeah.
Because the whole beginning of that is their entire environment is trying to push them to conform to what is the standard expected normal. And I put those adjectives on there because normal is a judgment call in the first place.
Normal is an illusion.
It's an illusion, and I want to be really clear about that. And Rudolph is a great story for that, to learn that from, because Rudolph is different from the others, and that should have been okay right from the get-go.
But see, Rudolph, more than any of the stories, does lend to this commodification in a very specific way. It's a retelling of the ugly duckling story. There was once a duckling on the pond that everybody thought was ugly, and everybody made fun of them until they realized the duckling was actually a swan.
Yeah.
That was being raised by the ducks. If you're not familiar with sorry, spoilers, I guess. I don't know. You never know what you have to give spoilers for nowadays. It's basically a retelling of that story. Remember, Rudolph was created as a way to get people to go to a Christmas sale. It was a book that was created by a store. And so there is this added level just built into it of, but you don't understand, he's useful. Whereas in the original Ugly Duckling story, no, they're just different. They're not a duck, they're a swan. And so that is kind of baked into the story. And once you realize that, I think this is why Rudolph disappears in a lot of other versions of Santa and his reindeer. Because, yes, we want a story of difference. This is why, for example, in the Tim Allen Santa Claus movies, Rudolph is replaced by Chet, who is the useless reindeer, who's just, he is clumsy, he's not good at anything, but ends up, his difference enables them to win the day and do all kinds of stuff. It is the Rudolph story, kinda, but without that commodification built into it, that he's not useful because he's useful. He doesn't have something magically that makes him useful. He wasn't seen as valuable because he was being judged harshly and unfairly. And we see this in other versions of the Santa Claus retelling as well, where we kind of see a replacement for Rudolph that doesn't have those elements tacked on. And you may be asking yourself this far into the episode, how does this help us spiritually? Everything we've talked about is spiritual practice. Learning to take care of others, learning to see the value in others, learning to be jolly, because as I've said, this year is about bringing silliness back and helping people to understand silly is holy. The word silly is a British way to make fun of the Scottish people who use the word say, which means holy or blessed or happy, to be just silly, to be goofy and weird and strange. And I want to take that back. Being happy, being silly is holy. And everything that we're talking about here is your spiritual practice. If you're not thinking about how you're taking care of others, how you are viewing others, how you are interacting with others, how you're interacting with yourself, if you are the Rudolph in the story, if you're the Charlie Brown in the story. The whole thing about Charlie Brown, I was the Charlie Brown in my own life. Well, I'm somewhere between Charlie Brown and Linus, but again, neither one of them is respected or really given the attention that they deserve, but they persist anyway. And it's learning that resilience because they have their place to play, they have their standout position, and they're able to be people in their own right. Beyond this, you have stories such as the Yule Cat, which reminds us that if we're not taking care of each other, there are dark, evil forces out there that will take advantage of those that are left unfortunate. Right? If you don't get socks for Christmas, the Yule Cat will eat you. Right? If you're not having things that help you deal with the harsh cold of winter will consume you. Right? I mean, it's a very one-to-one regretful story in there. And then you have the Yule Goat. And I kind of want to do like an entire episode about the Yule Goat, and I kind of want the Yule Goat to go international. The Yule Goat is one of my favorite traditions. It comes from Scandinavia. We have no idea exactly how old this tradition is. This may be an old pagan tradition that has just persisted with very few alterations to the modern day. There are a lot of components to it that I'm not going to be able to go into all of them because of the time left in here, but the family would craft, often out of straw or something, a little puppet of a goat that they would have in the house that would kind of symbolize this time of year. It was then incumbent on somebody in the community to make a large one about the size of a small dog that they would then hide on somebody else's property. And the thing is, once you found it, you are now obligated to hide it on somebody else's property. So the Yule Goat is being moved around. And in the earliest recountings of this tradition, you would during the season, you'd hear a knock on the door, and a bunch of people wearing animal skulls and hides would run into your house, ransack the place, eat and drink whatever they wanted, and play tricks on you and leave. And when they left, one member of your household was obligated to don an animal mask and an animal skin and join them and go out. It's kind of like wassailing done inside out. Over time, this changed, and they show up at the house and are basically community secret Santas in a way. They show up at the house, they're more in line with wassailing, and that they often will sing carols. They arrive bringing a gift or gifts. And again, one member of the household is expected to join in and continue going down. There's all of this tradition there and this wonderful Scandinavian tradition, not to mention, I'm terrible with pronouncing the names of Scandinavian towns, and I am not going to insult an entire country by trying to say it. In one town, they actually build a large Yule Goat every year, and I think only like 5-6 times has it survived to Christmas because somebody inevitably sets it on fire, which is a crime. You will go to jail. It is not legal for you to do, but it's kind of expected. Like somebody's going to set it on fire. So it will be vandalized in some way before Christmas because that rebellious spirit of the Yule Goat is still there, right? It's an interesting tradition that kind of has some things in common with like Krampusnacht. Though Krampusnacht, not as old as people want to say it is definitely a medieval tradition. We have no references of it going back further. Everything else is goose-stepping propaganda. Please do not fall for goose-stepping propaganda. They tried to appropriate Krampus, the whole thing. And we haven't even gotten to the Yule Lads, which are also this kind of rowdy tradition of this time of year. And that, by the way, is what Christmas used to be known for.
And it can be a little rowdy, but it also would be an excellent way for building community.
Yes.
Because you have somebody who now has to depart from the familiarity of their family relations and join in with the rest of at least that segment of the community that's running around and engaging in these festivities. So they're going to get to hang out with and get to know, at least the ones that are running around are going to get to know each other better so that then throughout the rest of the year, they can have hopefully healthier interactions and they're no longer just a stranger in the community, but they're part of it. I know from personal experience, at least the hiding and re-hiding of a thing really can build community really fast. At the restaurant, we had a shark.
It was a plastic
toy
shark
that
you would get to play with in the bathtub.
Yeah. And one day, one of the chefs hid it in a place. Just thought it was funny. And I think a server found it. And it was lots of fun because they found it. And then they re-hid it somewhere else. And this went around and around and around. And it got to the point where some of the children of some of the regulars had caught wind or spotted the shark at one point. And it was like they would be like to the server, excuse me, there's a shark there. And then they'd watch the server go over, get the shark, and then hide it somewhere else. So the children started to learn about this tradition over time and started even engaging in it. The ones that figured out what was going on, if they found it, I caught a couple of them pulling the toy out of one place and going and hiding it somewhere else. And it really did start to build up more of a community in that way.
And that's really how traditions start. We could do an entire episode on here are the traditions that you should have and people do those and they're fine. They're wonderful, but traditions really aren't top down. They are bottom up. There are probably stories that you have in your family that are Christmas stories that you don't realize are Christmas stories. I know for us, I found it very interesting that Wicked came out this time of year because Wizard of Oz is a Christmas story for us. I don't know why. We just always watched The Wizard of Oz around Christmas. So The Wizard of Oz is a Christmas story for us. I don't know. But I know, I'm wondering if it has to do with the Lollipop Guild or something like that candy and stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know. I really don't know.
It's like for those families that Die Hard's a Christmas movie, and you get others that are like, well, okay, maybe because it's set at Christmas time. But really the thing is when you go to the archetypes, you have a family that is struggling. They're living apart. They're kind of separated. They're on the rocks. The relationship is choppy. And through adversity that they overcome, it brings them tighter together and reunites them as a family. And in the end, it's about that family coming back together.
And it's all about teaching growth. That's something you'll notice in almost all of these traditions. It's either bring community spirit or personal growth together, which is all spiritual work. I like to refer to Die Hard as one man's valiant attempts to fight toxic masculinity in order to save his family, because once you think about that and then watch the movie again, it's like, oh, like, because Hans Gruber is the embodiment of toxic masculinity in so many ways. And you can see as our protagonist is having to get over those elements in himself in order to literally save his family. It's a fascinating thing, and one of the reasons why I think that movie in particular has such a strong following, especially at this time of the year. Because we're getting close to the end of our secular year. Christmas is not that far away from New Year's, and people are already starting to think about what they want to do differently. We're in a period of time where we're thinking of what has changed, what do we need to change, and we're going into a liminal period. And so we have this instinct where we're constantly creating stories. We haven't even talked about the Grinch or any of the other modern stories that could be brought up in here, or any of the other stories that, like, is Frozen a Christmas movie now? Like, it feels like it is. I hear it being brought up every year around Christmas. And I'm not just talking about because it's on the Disney app. People start singing Let It Go and other songs from Frozen more around this time of year. I don't know. The whole point of using stories is to remember, as we like to constantly remind people of, we are story machines. That is how humans work. That's how human cultures work. That's how humans work in general. So the way we tell stories and the kinds of stories that we tell really do affect the kinds of people we become and the kinds of people we aspire to be. And it's not surprising that those of us who came from northern climes, where a lot of these stories originate, have such a rich tradition of, here are the stories that are going to get us through the dark times, that are going to get us through to back to the light, back to the warmth, back to community and family, where we're all going to somehow find a way through struggle and toil to get there together. It just makes sense. And that is spiritual work. Spiritual work is not just about prayer and magic and ... It's about working on ourselves, our communities, and making sure that the stories that we are living with are vibrant and powerful and giving us meaning. Did we miss any of your favorite Christmas stories? I know I kind of mentioned a few in passing that we didn't have time for. I'm sure there's a lot that we missed. We missed The Little Drummer Boy. We missed one of my favorite Emmett Otter's jug band Christmas, which I absolutely like. Give me a Henson production anytime. I will watch it. I'm sure there's a lot that we've missed, and we'd love to know your favorites. Let us know down in the comments. If you're listening to us on YouTube or Spotify, you can leave a comment right there. If you're listening to us anywhere else, even if they say that you can leave a comment, they won't let us know, so we won't know. Leave a comment there anyway, because engagement is magic. And then head over to creationspaths.com and click on chat. You can leave a comment there, and we will be able to see it and be able to get back to you, because I would love to have a conversation about this, especially if you have a offbeat Christmas story that you like. We didn't even mention a Christmas story, because there are so many. So many. I'm looking forward to rewatching Spirited this year, which is a very fun retelling of Scrooge, but kind of inside out and backwards, I guess might be a way to put it. It's good. Ryan Reynolds and Will Ferrell, just amazing if you haven't seen it. What are your favorite stories? Let us know. What are your favorite ways to tell these stories and share them with others? You can even do 'Twas the Night Before Christmas or any of the others. So many. While you're over at Creations Fast, if you happen to have a few dollars you can pass our way, think about joining a membership, or you can support us on Patreon or Ko-fi. I am CE Dorset on both. Thank you for doing that. It helps us to keep the lights on, keep a roof over our heads, and food on our tables. And as we are heading out, I think it is only fair to say a little prayer to the spirit of the Christmas, which has seemingly become something invoked a lot these days. Oh, blessed spirit of Christmas, help us to have a holly jolly time where we can find the joy in the season, the camaraderie amongst friends and family, and the strength to get through to the new year and all the things that await us there, that we may have the gifts of peace and joy and all the powers that we need. Amen.
Amen.